They say love feels like magic. And maybe for a while it really does. But no one ever tells you that sometimes magic fades, quietly, painfully, until you're left standing in the silence it leaves behind. My name is Elena, and I used to believe that love could fix anything. I thought love was pure, selfless, unbreakable. I thought he was my forever. It started 2 years ago, on a rainy evening in New York. I was sitting at a small coffee shop near the corner of Fifth Avenue, trying to finish a paper for my design course. The rain outside had turned the city into a blur of reflections. Lights shimmering on wet glass, cars rushing by, people hiding under umbrellas. That's when I saw him. He walked in like someone who didn't belong to the noise of this world. Calm, confident, and quietly charming. His name was Noah. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me. And for reasons I still can't explain, it felt like I'd known him forever. He smiled once, that kind of smile that makes time pause. "You look like someone trying to save the world with a pen," he said. I laughed, probably too loud. That's how it began. We started meeting every day after that. Not because we planned to, but because we couldn't seem to stay away from each other. He said he liked how I talked about my dreams, how I believed in art, kindness, and little things that didn't make money but made meaning. And I liked how he listened, really listened, like every word I said mattered. He wasn't just a man. He was my safe place. My morning texts, my midnight calls, my "how was your day?" when no one else cared. He became the rhythm of my life, and for a while, everything was beautiful. Noah had big dreams. He wanted to start his own company, build something meaningful. I believed in him. I supported him through every failure, every setback. When he couldn't pay rent, I shared mine. When he doubted himself, I reminded him who he was. And when he said, "One day we'll build a life together," I believed him. But maybe love isn't about believing. Maybe it's about seeing, and I didn't see the distance growing. It started small. A missed call here, a late reply there. I told myself he was busy, chasing his dream. I didn't want to be the kind of girlfriend who complained. But soon he wasn't just busy. He was absent. He stopped showing up at the cafe where we first met. He stopped calling at night. His messages got shorter. Good night turned into Jian. I love you turned into nothing at all. At first I blamed myself. Maybe I was too emotional, too demanding. Maybe I wasn't enough. That's what love does. It teaches you how to question yourself before you ever question them. Then one night, I saw something I couldn't unsee. He had posted a photo on his story. Something simple, just a dinner plate and 2 glasses of wine. But in the reflection of the window behind it, there was a girl. I stared at that reflection for hours. My hands trembled as my mind raced, searching for excuses. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was business. But deep down, my heart already knew. He wasn't mine anymore. I didn't confront him right away. I waited. Days turned into weeks. I wanted him to tell me himself, to admit what I already knew. But he never did. He just drifted further away until his silence became louder than his lies. I remember the night I finally asked, "Noah, are we okay?" He hesitated. He didn't even look at me. "Elena, I just think we've grown apart." Those words. They cut through me like glass. Grown apart? How do you grow apart from someone you promised to grow with? I tried to be strong, to keep my voice from breaking. "Was it me?" I whispered. "Did I do something wrong?" He sighed. "You didn't do anything. It's just different now. Different." That's what people say when they've already fallen for someone else. He left that night without looking back. And I stood there, in that same rain that had once brought us together, now watching it wash everything away. For weeks, I replayed every moment in my head, trying to find the exact second when love turned into indifference. I couldn't. Maybe it wasn't 1 second. Maybe it was 1,000 tiny ones that slipped by unnoticed. Every "I'll call you later" that never came. Every "I'm just tired" that was really "I'm done." I didn't cry the night he left. I didn't scream. I just sat on my floor and listened to the quiet. It was strange how peaceful heartbreak could sound when there's nothing left to fight for. They say time heals everything, but time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to live with what hurts. I started walking alone again, eating alone, dreaming alone. And slowly, painfully, I learned that I didn't need him to complete me. I was already whole. But even now, sometimes when it rains, I find myself looking at that same cafe across the street, half expecting to see him walk in again, order his black coffee, and smile like nothing ever broke, but he never does. Because love, once gone, doesn't return. It just becomes a memory you learn to live with. And maybe that's okay. The first weeks after Noah left were a kind of weather that lives inside you, gray and heavy even when the sun is out. I moved through my days like someone wading through water. Everything took more effort than it should. I answered emails. I showed up to class. I smiled at people who asked if I was doing okay now, and I nodded because nodding was easier than explaining that my ribs felt like a birdcage with the bird missing. I kept telling myself I was imagining things. That dinner photo with the blurry reflection could have been anyone. That pause before he said we'd grown apart could have been nerves, but the mind has a cruel way of replaying what the heart already knows. I scrolled through old messages and watched the arc of us like a skyline, tall at the start, small at the end. I saw how "good morning, beautiful" became "busy day, text later." How long messages turned into thumbs-up emojis. You don't notice a season changing when you live inside it. You notice it when the leaves are already on the ground. One evening I went back to the cafe where we'd met. The table near the window was free. The barista still wore the same copper name tag, and the rain, because of course it was raining, made the city a watercolor again. I ordered a black coffee I wouldn't drink and sat where his smile used to be. I told myself I was saying goodbye to a place, not a person. That was a lie I could hold without shaking. The truth came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was finishing a mock-up for a design critique when my phone lit up with a notification I didn't expect. A tagged photo in a mutual friend's story. It was a launch party for a new startup. There were Edison bulbs and brick walls, and people trying to look effortless about being photographed. And there was Noah, laughing into the camera, his hand resting on the small of a woman's back. She was the girl from the reflection. Same hair, same dress, same quiet confidence I used to think was ours. The caption read, "Power couple." She designed the brand. He built the dream. It felt like a small, clean cut, sharp enough that it took a second to sting. I stared until the image blurred. My hands remembered how to shake. The room didn't spin. It tilted. My professor's voice turned to static, and the critique ended without me noticing. I walked home slowly because fast felt like falling. I didn't text him that night. I didn't ask who she was. I didn't want explanations shaped like excuses. I lay on my back and watched the ceiling fan draw lazy circles, and I thought about the first time he held my hand, how his palm had been warm and certain. I thought about how he'd promised to build a life with me. I thought about how easy it is to build a life when you use someone else's plans. A week passed, then 2. Sleep became a stranger who visited if I begged. I kept seeing them together, his hand where it had once lived at the small of my back, his mouth saying the right words to a different face. I tried to be practical. I made lists. Drink water, go outside, send the file, call your mother back. I crossed off tasks like I was crossing out grief. It didn't work. One night, the girl messaged me. I didn't know her name until it appeared at the top of my screen. Harper. She wrote, "Hey, you don't know me, but I feel like I know you. I found your sketches in his Dropbox." He said, "You're amazing." I just wanted to say, "Your work is beautiful." She added a heart I couldn't return. It wasn't cruelty. It was survival. I typed a dozen replies and deleted them all. I finally sent, "Thanks, wishing you well." I meant it and I didn't. Both can be true when your heart is learning how to hold two things without breaking further. Maya, my friend who believes feelings are facts, not inconveniences, came over with 2 salty ramen and a firm voice. She sat cross-legged on my floor and said, "You're allowed to grieve him like a death, because for you, it is." I cried then, a quiet, tired crying that sounded like air being let out of a room. She didn't tell me to be strong. She told me to breathe. Sometimes permission is a life raft. The betrayal wasn't just the new girl. It was the timeline my mind kept building. I remembered the nights he said he was heads down when he was probably looking up at her. I remembered the launch deck he'd asked me to review, how the color palette looked like mine, how the tagline sounded like my words, softened and renamed. I looked through my exports and found a file dated a month before we ended. He'd saved my concept into a folder with his company's name on it. I wanted to be surprised. I wasn't anger arrived like weather finally breaking. It didn't roar. It steadied. I printed screenshots. I backed up messages. I wrote dates in a notebook because some truths deserve ink. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted reality to have somewhere to live besides my head. I wasn't going to burn his life down. I was going to stop letting him burn mine. I drafted an email to him I never planned to send. You taught me something important. You taught me how love turns into silence, how silence turns into absence, how absence becomes a story we tell ourselves so we can sleep at night. I hope your story helps you sleep. I hope mine helps me wake. I saved it as unsent. Naming things correctly is a way of not getting lost. My work suffered, then steadied. In critique, I began sharing again. I stopped designing for someone who had already moved on and started designing for the part of me that hadn't. I took a small freelance project for a bookstore that smelled like dust and promise. The owner, an older woman with a laugh that came out in bursts, told me, "Make it gentle. The world is loud enough." I painted soft blues in a serif that felt like a doorway. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled without counting. Still, nights were long. I downloaded a meditation app and almost threw my phone when a calm voice told me to visualize a safe place. Safe had a face once. Now it had an empty chair, so I made a new one. I pictured a studio with wide windows and plants I wouldn't kill. I pictured a long table with room for all my drafts, and a kettle that sang softly when water was ready, and friends who knocked and didn't need to be told twice to come in. I saw Noah once more, by accident. It was at a street market on a Sunday that smelled like cinnamon and rain. He was with Harper, her hand tucked easily into his. He saw me, and something flickered. Guilt, maybe, or the kind of surprise you feel when the past waves from across the street. He mouthed hello. I nodded. We didn't stop. We didn't talk. I turned the corner and leaned against a brick wall and counted to 50 like a child trying not to cry. I failed at 52. When I got home, I took the box that held our leftover pieces. Ticket stubs, a cork from the bottle we opened when his prototype finally worked, a note he'd written on a napkin that said, "You make the world kind." I held each piece until it felt smaller. Then I put the box at the back of my closet, not as punishment, but as a museum. Some exhibits you only visit when you're strong enough to leave without wanting to stay. Maya convinced me to try therapy. I showed up late and defensive. The therapist asked me what I wanted. I said, to not think about him when it rains. She smiled in that way people do when they've heard a sentence that means more than it says. "What do you want when it doesn't rain?" she asked. I didn't know yet. That scared me more than the storm. We worked on small truths. That love can be real even if it ends badly. That betrayal says more about the betrayer than the betrayed. That closures are choices, not gifts. She gave me a sentence to practice when the ache arrived. This feeling is a visitor, not a verdict. I said it out loud until it sounded like mine. I started walking different streets to avoid the cafe. Then one afternoon, my feet took me there anyway. The table by the window was occupied by two strangers leaning too close. Good. Let it hold new beginnings. I ordered tea instead of coffee and sat at a different table, one without a memory built into it. I drew a line across a blank page and called it Horizon. Then I sketched buildings that didn't exist yet and put tiny windows in them and drew little lamps inside the windows so it looked like someone lived there. On the way out, I passed the corkboard where people pin lost dog notices and guitar teacher flyers. A new index card caught my eye. Call for designers. Community arts project. Volunteers, welcome. I took a photo of the number and surprised myself by actually dialing it later. A woman named Priya answered with a voice that sounded like a front porch. "We're painting a mural," she said. "We need hands that know where color belongs." I laughed and told her I could try. Back home, I finally washed the mug Noah used to prefer. It had lived in the sink too long, a monument to inertia. The stain left a ring like an eclipse. It took effort, and then it didn't. I set it on the rack and watched water bead and run. There are metaphors everywhere when you're ready to see them, and nowhere when you aren't. I don't pretend I was brave. I was messy and late and sometimes unkind to myself. I checked his profile more often than I wanted to. I measured my progress in hours, not days. But the line moved. The noise inside my chest quieted enough that I could hear my own footsteps again. I began to think about a future that didn't need him to arrive. The night before the mural's first meeting, thunder crawled across the sky and rain came down like a confession. I stood by the window and watched it streak the glass into a familiar blur. I waited for the old ache to knock. It did. I let it in, gave it a chair, and told it I had plans in the morning. It stayed a while, and then, like weather, it moved on. Healing doesn't come like sunlight through a window, soft and steady. It comes like lightning, sudden, unpredictable, sometimes beautiful, sometimes terrifying. And sometimes it burns before it brings light. After Noah, I didn't wake up one morning feeling better. There was no grand revelation, no cinematic music rising behind me. Healing began quietly, in the smallest, most human ways. In brushing my hair after days of not caring. In making breakfast for one, and actually eating it. In opening the blinds and realizing that the sky still changed color without asking for permission. I joined the mural project that week. The first day my hands shook as I held a brush again. It wasn't about painting anymore. It was about proving to myself that I still could. Priya, the woman who ran the project, greeted me with a smile that reached her eyes. "You must be Elena," she said. "You look like someone who has stories hiding under her skin." I laughed. "Don't we all?" She nodded. "Good. Then paint them out." The wall we were working on stretched across an abandoned alley in Brooklyn, gray, cracked, and forgotten. But that's the thing about art. It finds the forgotten and gives it meaning again. The first stroke of color felt like a heartbeat. Blue, soft at first. Then bolder. Then alive. I painted from memory. The rain, the coffee shop, the reflection of a girl I didn't know, and the emptiness Noah left behind. But as the days passed, I noticed something changing. My strokes grew warmer. Less pain, more peace. Less what I lost, more what I found. There was a guy there named Eli. He was quiet, older than me by a few years, and had a habit of whistling old jazz tunes while painting. He never asked about my past, never told me about his. We just painted, side by side. Sometimes in silence, sometimes laughing about things that didn't matter. One afternoon, while we were cleaning brushes, he looked at me and said, "You paint like someone who's been broken," but didn't stay that way. I smiled softly. "Maybe that's the only way to paint," he nodded. Or live. That sentence stayed with me. Weeks turned into months. The mural started to come alive. A giant, sprawling scene of people holding each other, trees growing through cracks in concrete, hands reaching for light. Every time I looked at it, I saw myself in the colors. Not the girl waiting for a text that never came, but the woman learning how to create beauty from her own ruins. But healing doesn't erase memories, it rewrites them. And one afternoon, while walking home, I passed by that same cafe. For the first time in months, I didn't flinch. I went inside. The smell of coffee and rain hit me all at once. There was a couple laughing at our old table. And for a second, I wanted to look away. But instead, I smiled. Because the sound of their laughter didn't hurt. It reminded me that love, even when it ends, leaves echoes that can still be beautiful. I ordered tea, not coffee, and sat by the opposite window this time. That's when I realized something simple, something true. Closure isn't a conversation. It's a moment you give yourself when the past stops asking for your attention. I pulled out my sketch pad and started drawing again. Only this time the lines didn't shake. They flowed. A few nights later, I received an email from a small magazine that had seen my designs at the mural event. They wanted to feature my artwork in their next issue, under a section called Art After the Storm. The title made me laugh through tears. When the feature came out, they asked me for a quote. I wrote, "Sometimes what breaks you doesn't end you. It redirects you." That quote went viral online. Messages started flooding in from women around the world. Strangers telling me how my story felt like theirs. One wrote, "Thank you for reminding me that pain can be recycled into purpose." And for the first time, I realized maybe my heartbreak had a reason. Maybe it was never just about losing Noah. Maybe it was about finding me. One evening, months later, I saw him again. I was at an art exhibition where our mural had been featured in a small gallery. He walked in, looking almost the same. Same calm eyes, same careful posture. But something about him felt smaller now, like a chapter I'd already finished reading. He saw me. I saw him. For a moment, we just stood there. No hate, no anger. Just distance, the kind that grows between who you were and who you've become. He smiled, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of nostalgia. "Elena," he said softly, "you look happy." "I am," I said simply. And it wasn't a line. It was the truth. He hesitated, as if he wanted to say something else. But the silence between us said everything. He'd built his dream, and I'd built mine. Different dreams. Different people. Different kinds of love. I walked away before the moment could turn into memory again. And as I stepped out of that gallery, the city lights shimmered across the wet pavement, reflecting like tiny stars scattered on the ground. For the first time, I didn't feel alone under them. I felt free. Weeks later, Eli called me and said, "We're painting another mural next month. Bigger this time. You in? I smiled at the phone. Always. That mural became my next beginning, a canvas filled with second chances. We painted people looking up at the sky, hands outstretched towards something unseen. Hope. Forgiveness. Maybe both. At the bottom corner, I painted a small message in gold. To everyone who thought heartbreak was the end, it's just where your story learns how to begin again. I still think about Noah sometimes. Not with pain, not with longing, just gratitude. Because if he hadn't left, I wouldn't have found the version of me that could stand tall again. Love doesn't always stay, but it always teaches. And sometimes, what we lose in love, we find in ourselves. So if you're listening, if your heart is heavy and your eyes are tired, remember this. You will laugh again. You will paint again. You will look at the rain and smile again. Because healing doesn't happen when someone comes back. It happens when you do.